The late morning sun cast a warm glow over the Marston family home, a grand mansion nestled within a lush, gated estate. The house was an architectural marvel, complete with marble columns, intricately carved moldings, and high, vaulted ceilings. Mia Marston stood in the foyer, watching with a mix of anticipation and relief as a technician made the final adjustments to the newly installed stairlift. For Mia, this wasn't just an addition to the home, it was a chance for her daughter, Ellie, to experience a sense of independence in a house that sometimes felt too big, too complicated, and too restrictive for her needs. Ellie, a bright 9-year-old girl with a vivacious spirit, had cerebral palsy, which made navigating the multi-story mansion a challenge. The stairlift symbolized freedom for Ellie, and for Mia, it was a small victory in her ongoing mission to make the world as accessible and fulfilling as possible for her daughter. Beside Mia stood her husband, David Marston, reviewing the final paperwork with the technician, tall, with an air of quiet authority. David was a successful corporate attorney, a man used to control and precision. But here, in this moment, he let his professional exterior slip just a bit, grinning as Ellie's face lit up with excitement. The sleek, modern stairlift, gleaming in chrome and upholstered in plush navy fabric, wound its way up the sweeping staircase in smooth, silent loops. "Look, Daddy!" Ellie exclaimed, her eyes wide with awe as she pointed to the stairlift. "Can I try it now? Can I?" David smiled, ruffling her hair affectionately. "Almost, sweetheart," he replied. "Let's make sure everything's perfect before you go for a ride, okay?" Mia's heart swelled at the sight of her husband's tenderness. It was these small moments that reminded her why she loved him so deeply, even if they didn't always agree on the best ways to handle Ellie's care. For Mia, every decision surrounding Ellie's well-being required careful thought, whereas David, despite his love and devotion, sometimes viewed things more practically. As David handed the signed documents back to the technician, the doorbell rang, cutting through the peaceful moment. Ronald, the Marstons' trusted butler, immediately stepped forward to answer it, a middle-aged man with a distinguished air. Ronald had served the Marston family faithfully for years, helping Mia manage the sprawling household and assisting with Ellie whenever needed. When Ronald opened the door, a woman in her late 40s, neatly dressed in a tailored gray suit, stood on the doorstep. Her posture was impeccably straight, and her expression was calm, composed, and professional. "Good morning," the woman said, her voice polished and crisp. "I'm Edith Hayes. Mr. Marston arranged for me to come as the new nanny for Ellie." Mia's eyebrows rose in surprise, exchanging a quick, confused glance with David. "A nanny?" she repeated, her voice laced with disbelief as she turned to her husband. She hadn't been consulted about hiring anyone new, let alone a nanny. This was certainly not part of their usual process when it came to Ellie's care. David looked equally taken aback, though his surprise quickly shifted into a look of mild embarrassment. I did speak with an agency last week about potential extra help," he said, his voice faltering slightly. "But I didn't make any final decisions. There must have been some sort of miscommunication." Edith, her expression unchanging, offered a small smile. "Mr. Marston, the agency informed me that you had expressed an urgent need for additional support for your daughter. Given my experience, they suggested I come right away." Mia felt a pang of frustration rising within her, her carefully maintained calm starting to crack. She prided herself on being fully involved in every aspect of Ellie's care, and to learn that David had taken this step without her input stung. How could he have made such an important decision alone? With a tight smile, Mia turned to her husband. "David," she said in a low voice, barely containing her irritation, "could we speak privately for a moment?" Her tone left little room for debate. David nodded, gesturing for Ronald to lead Edith to the library while they sorted things out. As soon as they were alone in the living room, Mia didn't waste any time. "David," she began, crossing her arms, How could you decide to hire a nanny without discussing it with me first? You know how important it is for us to be aligned when it comes to Ellie's care. David held up his hands in a placating gesture. Mia, I swear, I didn't officially hire anyone. I just made an inquiry with the agency. Things have been so hectic at work, and I thought maybe an extra set of hands could help. I meant to bring it up, but it slipped my mind. That's exactly the point, David, Mia replied, her voice carrying a sharp edge. We can't let things just slip our minds when it comes to Ellie. Every decision needs to be made together, especially when it involves her care. David sighed, running a hand through his hair. I know. You're right, Mia. I shouldn't have acted on my own. But since she's here, maybe we could at least talk to her and see if she might be a good fit. Mia hesitated, torn between her frustration and the sense of responsibility to evaluate anyone who might work with Ellie. Fine, she agreed reluctantly. But I'm bringing Ellie along to the meeting. I want to see how she responds to Edith. They returned to the foyer, where Ellie was still admiring the stairlift with wide-eyed fascination. Mia gently called her over, then walked with her toward the library, mentally steeling herself for the meeting ahead. She didn't know what to expect from this unexpected visitor, but something in her gut told her not to let her guard down. As they entered the library, Mia's gaze fell upon Edith, who was standing beside a tall bookshelf, her attention now fixed on Ellie. Edith's smile widened, but it felt almost clinical, calculated. A smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She crouched down to Ellie's level, her eyes scanning her carefully. Hello there, Ellie, she said, her voice dripping with a saccharine sweetness. I'm Miss Edith. What's your name? Ellie, who was usually full of questions and chatter, seemed to shrink under Edith's intense gaze. Clutching her mother's hand tightly, she glanced up at Mia, her wide eyes searching her mother's face for reassurance. And Mia felt a prick of unease. When Ellie didn't answer right away, Edith's smile shifted slightly. It's good to see a young lady so well-mannered, she commented, a strange edge creeping into her tone. Quietness is a rare virtue these days. Mia felt a chill run down her spine. There was something in Edith's voice, something subtle but undeniably unsettling. With a gentle squeeze of Ellie's hand, Mia cleared her throat, breaking the tension. Ellie's a bit shy with new people, she said, her voice firm but polite. She's 9 years old and loves reading and drawing. She's also very strong-willed. David chuckled from behind them, oblivious to the growing tension. Yes, she's quite the chatterbox once she gets going. I'm sure you'll see for yourself soon enough. Edith's smile tightened as her gaze flickered to David. I'm sure I will, Mr. Marston. Children often just need a bit of discipline to bring out their best qualities. Mia felt her stomach clench. The word discipline lingered in the air, thick with an unsettling undercurrent. But despite her reservations, she forced herself to stay calm, reminding herself that this was merely an interview, a way to evaluate Edith before making any decisions. As they continued to speak, Mia couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. The Marston family's living room filled with an uncomfortable quiet as Mia, David, Ellie, and Edith sat down to continue the interview. The room was tastefully decorated, with high ceilings, plush sofas, and a beautiful stone fireplace that Mia usually found comforting. Today, however, the familiar surroundings offered no comfort. Edith's poised presence filled the space in an unnerving way, her stiffly professional demeanor contrasting sharply with the warmth Mia had always hoped to cultivate for Ellie's sake. Mia kept a close eye on Ellie, who sat tucked next to her on the sofa, unusually quiet and reserved. Normally, Ellie would be excited and eager to meet someone new, but this time, she seemed withdrawn, her small fingers wrapped tightly around her mother's hand. Edith's intense gaze had unsettled Ellie, and Mia could sense her daughter's apprehension. Still, she knew this interview needed to proceed if she were to find out more about this unexpected candidate. Edith, smiling politely, looked at Ellie. Ellie, do you like books? Maybe I could read to you sometime. she said in a gentle, practiced voice, though there was an underlying tension that Mia couldn't ignore. Ellie glanced up, her eyes wide but wary. She nodded, offering a shy, whispered yes. Mia squeezed her daughter's hand reassuringly, grateful for even this small response. She felt a slight surge of defensiveness. However, as Edith's eyes briefly shifted to Mia, her gaze assessing, as if Ellie's reserved response reflected poorly on Mia's parenting. Well, Mrs. Marston, Edith began, turning her focus back to Mia and David. I understand Ellie has cerebral palsy. I have extensive experience with children who have similar needs, and I've found that maintaining a disciplined and structured environment can be immensely helpful. Mia felt the words wash over her with a heavy, cold clarity. Discipline again. She managed a polite nod, although internally, her maternal instinct screamed that discipline was hardly the priority for Ellie's well-being. She chose her words carefully, her tone professional but firm. Edith, we value structure, of course, Mia said, choosing her words carefully. But we also prioritize creating a nurturing and supportive environment. Ellie's world can be challenging enough with her physical limitations, so we try to give her a lot of patience and understanding. Edith nodded, but Mia couldn't help noticing the faintest flicker of disapproval cross her face. Of course, Edith replied, her tone syrupy but restrained. Though, in my experience, children thrive on understanding clear boundaries. Some find it easier to meet the world's challenges when they learn a bit of resilience early on. David, always the diplomat, chuckled lightly to ease the tension. Ellie could definitely use a bit of independence. She relies on us a lot, so some support in that area might be good for her, he said, casting Mia a quick look, hoping for her agreement. Mia forced a smile but kept her gaze on Edith. She noted the nanny's calculated nod, as if David's words confirmed her own philosophy on child-rearing. Mia's heart thudded with unease. Could she really trust this woman with Ellie's fragile heart and needs? Seemingly satisfied with David's comment, Edith turned her attention back to Ellie. Her smile, though friendly on the surface, seemed to Mia to carry an unnatural intensity. So, Ellie, she said, her voice soft but probing, do you have a lot of friends? Do you play with other children often? Ellie hesitated, looking up at Mia before quietly murmuring, not really, but I play with Mommy and Daddy. Edith murmured, a hint of something sharp flashing across her face. It's important for children to learn to socialize without their parents always by their side. Independence is something children grow into when given the chance. Mia's jaw clenched. She was beginning to see that Edith's ideas about discipline and independence seemed less about support and more about control. And yet, she could see David's thoughtful expression as he listened, likely considering Edith's words as sound advice. They had spoken many times about giving Ellie a bit more room to grow on her own, and Mia knew David saw this potential nanny as a means to that end. As the conversation continued, Edith asked Ellie more questions, each one feeling more like an interrogation than casual interaction. What do you like to do to help your mother around the house? Ellie? She asked with a strange intensity. Ellie squirmed, glancing at her mother for reassurance. I help Mommy set the table sometimes. Edith's eyebrows rose slightly. Is that all? She asked, her tone teetering on condescending. I'm sure you could be doing a bit more. Mia felt her patience slipping, each of Edith's questions grating on her nerves. Ellie was a kind-hearted, bright child with physical limitations that already made her daily life challenging. Edith's probing seemed unnecessarily harsh, dismissing Ellie's genuine contributions as insufficient. But Mia held her tongue, not wanting to cause a scene in front of Ellie. Instead, she offered a soothing hand on her daughter's shoulder, quietly reassuring her that she was doing just fine. David, however, seemed to take Edith's words in stride, nodding thoughtfully as if she were providing sound counsel. It was Edith's next comment, though, that finally set Mia on edge. You know, Mrs. Marston, Edith said, fixing her gaze on Mia with an almost pitying look. Children with disabilities can benefit immensely from a firmer hand. Sometimes, what they need most is someone who can show them they're capable of more than they think. Mia's pulse quickened, her frustration barely contained. "Ellie is very capable," she said, her voice unwavering. "We support her in everything she wants to do, at her own pace. Her abilities are not something we're trying to toughen up, but rather nurture." Edith's smile didn't falter, though a glimmer of irritation flickered in her eyes. "Of course," she replied, the words hanging in the air with forced politeness. "I only mean to say that some parents may underestimate what their children are capable of." A strained silence filled the room. Mia glanced at David, but his expression remained neutral, as if he was still weighing everything Edith had said. David finally spoke up, his voice calm and considerate. "Edith, we appreciate your insights. I think some structure could be helpful, but we also want to make sure that Ellie's environment remains compassionate and supportive." Edith nodded, casting a quick, satisfied glance at David before her eyes settled back on Mia. "Understood, Mr. Marston, and I can assure you that my methods are always focused on the child's best interest." Mia clenched her fists beneath the coffee table, the seeds of doubt firmly planted in her mind. Despite David's apparent comfort with Edith, she couldn't shake the feeling that Edith's methods might not align with the kind of care Ellie needed. As they wrapped up the conversation, David rose, signaling the meeting was coming to an end. "Thank you for coming, Edith," he said warmly. "I think a trial period might be beneficial. How about starting this evening? It would give us a chance to see how things go." Mia's heart sank. "Tonight?" she asked, her voice rising slightly in surprise. "David, don't you think we should wait? At least give Ellie some time to adjust to Edith." But David offered her a reassuring smile. "It'll be fine, Mia. Edith is clearly experienced, and Ronald will be here if anything comes up. It might be good for Ellie to start getting used to someone new." Edith beamed, as if David's decision had been a foregone conclusion. "I'd be delighted to start tonight," she said, her tone self-assured. Mia forced a polite nod, feeling trapped by David's enthusiasm and her own growing misgivings. It was true that they had discussed giving Ellie more independence. But was this the right way? Despite everything Edith had said, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. As they walked Edith to the door, Mia lingered back, silently vowing to keep a close eye on this nanny. She didn't trust Edith. Not yet, perhaps never, but for now, she had no choice but to play along, hoping that her instincts were wrong. As Edith left to prepare for her evening return, Mia watched her from the doorway, a chill settling over her. The evening sun was beginning to set as Mia Marston paced around the grand living room, her gaze continually flickering toward the stairs. She tried to reassure herself that David was right, that she was overreacting, that Edith's structured approach could bring positive changes for Ellie. But each time she thought about Edith's cold, scrutinizing eyes on her daughter, her stomach tightened with unease. David had just left to pick up a bottle of wine for their neighbor Henry's evening barbecue, a last-minute social event that he'd been keen to attend. Mia had reluctantly agreed to go, knowing it might help them unwind after a busy week. But her mind was already filled with doubts about leaving Ellie alone with a stranger. The front door creaked open, and Edith stepped in, her posture as stiff and composed as it had been earlier. She wore a crisp navy blazer and a skirt that ended just below her knees, giving her a polished, almost clinical appearance. In one hand, she carried a small leather bag, which she set down beside the coat rack. "Good evening, Mrs. Marston," Edith greeted with a faint smile, her gaze quickly scanning the room as if making a mental checklist of her surroundings. Mia nodded politely. "Hello, Edith. Ellie is upstairs finishing her dinner, but I'll bring her down in a moment. Ronald will also be here to assist you with anything you need." Edith gave a curt nod, her expression unreadable. "Of course, I'm prepared." Mia hesitated, searching Edith's face for any hint of warmth or reassurance. Finding none, she forced herself to smile and continued upstairs to fetch Ellie. She found her daughter sitting in her room, carefully arranging her stuffed animals in a line on her bed, a favorite pre-bedtime ritual. Ellie looked up and smiled as Mia entered, her face lighting up. "Mama, look, Teddy's wearing his pajamas, too," she said, pointing proudly at a small teddy bear in striped doll-sized pajamas. Mia smiled, kneeling down beside Ellie. "They're all ready for bed, just like you." Ellie's smile faded slightly as she glanced past her mother, toward the stairs. "Do you have to go to the party, Mama?" she asked, her voice soft and hesitant. "Can't you stay with me tonight?" Mia's heart clenched, her own hesitation mirrored in Ellie's worried expression. She gently brushed a stray hair from Ellie's forehead. "I'll be gone just for a little while, sweetheart. Edith and Ronald will be here if you need anything, and I'll check on you first thing when I get home. I promise." Ellie nodded slowly, though her small hands gripped Teddy a little tighter. As Mia helped Ellie downstairs, she found Edith waiting in the living room, her expression patient but devoid of warmth. Edith immediately crouched down, looking Ellie in the eye with that familiar, intense stare. "Hello again, Ellie," she said, her voice soft but unyielding. "We're going to have a wonderful evening together. You'll follow all my instructions, and everything will be just fine." Ellie nodded, her eyes darting to Mia as if seeking silent reassurance. Mia gave her daughter's hand one last squeeze, then glanced over at Ronald, who stood by the door. She took a deep breath, willing herself to believe that Edith's professionalism was exactly what they needed. But the pit of worry in her stomach remained. "We'll be back soon," Mia said, directing the words as much to herself as to Edith and Ronald. As she and David stepped outside and closed the door, a wave of apprehension washed over her. For Ellie's sake, she pushed it aside, hoping that this trial would give them the clarity they needed. The drive to Henry's house was short, but to Mia, felt like a journey in slow motion. David chatted about work and the people they'd see at the barbecue, but she only half listened, her mind preoccupied with the thought of Ellie alone in the house with Edith. Once they arrived, she did her best to engage in the casual conversation and cheerful ambience. Henry's backyard was filled with laughter, the aroma of grilled food, and the pleasant hum of evening chatter. But Mia's thoughts were elsewhere, and even as she politely joined conversations and sipped a glass of wine, her gaze kept returning to her phone. Finally, unable to take the anxiety any longer, she excused herself and opened the home security app, tapping through the cameras placed around their house. She cycled through the rooms, her heart sinking as she noticed Ellie wasn't visible in any of the usual places. Not in her bedroom, not in the playroom, and not in the living room. Mia's chest tightened as she tapped through each feed again. Still, no sign of Ellie. She felt a sudden urge to call home, hoping that Ronald or even Edith would answer and reassure her that everything was fine. But as the line rang on and on without an answer, her anxiety grew sharper. "What's wrong?" David's voice interrupted her thoughts as he approached, a puzzled look on his face. Mia lowered her phone, her voice tense. "Ellie's not on any of the cameras. David, I've checked every room, and no one's picking up the phone." David gave her a reassuring smile, placing a hand on her shoulder. "They're probably in the backyard. Mia, it's fine. Ronald would call if anything were wrong, and it's good for Ellie to spend some time without us hovering." Mia tried to steady her breathing, forcing herself to trust David's words. But the uneasy feeling gnawed at her, refusing to be ignored. Finally, she turned to him, her mind made up. "I need to go home, David. I know it seems silly, but I need to check on her." David sighed, the familiar look of exasperation flashing across his face. "Mia, you have to let go a little. We agreed to try this." But Mia shook her head, resolute. "I'm sorry, David. I have to make sure. Seeing the determination in her eyes, he sighed again, then nodded. All right, let's go. I know you won't relax until we do. The drive back to the house was silent, tension thick in the air as Mia's mind raced with 100 possible scenarios. As they pulled into the driveway, she immediately noticed that the lights were dimmed more than usual, casting an eerie stillness over the house. Mia practically sprinted to the front door, pushing it open and calling Ellie's name. No response. Her heart pounded as she moved from room to room, her anxiety only growing as each empty room passed. Finally, faint voices from the backyard reached her ears. She stepped out onto the patio, and the sight before her stopped her dead in her tracks. There was Edith, standing on the uneven grass, guiding Ellie to walk without her walker or her safety vest. A serious fall risk for a child with Ellie's condition. Ellie's legs wobbled, and her face was scrunched in concentration, though Mia could see the pain and strain it took for her daughter to hold herself up. Steady now, Ellie, Edith was saying, her tone almost militaristic. No one's here to help you, so you'd better learn to do this on your own. Mia felt a surge of anger and protectiveness flood her chest. She rushed forward, her voice ringing out sharply. Edith, what do you think you're doing? Ellie looked up, her face flooded with relief as she saw her mother. Mia quickly moved to her daughter's side, helping her regain balance and holding her protectively. Edith's expression shifted, her cool professionalism barely masking her annoyance. Mrs. Marston, I was simply working on building Ellie's strength and resilience. Children with limitations like hers often need a push to discover their true abilities. Mia's jaw tightened as she looked down at Ellie, who was visibly exhausted and teary-eyed, small bruises already forming on her legs. She is not some project for you to push to the breaking point, Mia replied, her voice low and controlled. David, who had been following close behind, caught up and looked between Mia and Edith with a mixture of confusion and concern. What's going on here? Edith thought it was acceptable to make Ellie walk without her safety gear, Mia said, her voice barely masking her anger. Edith looked to David, her voice calm as she said, Mr. Marston, I was merely helping Ellie realize her potential. Too much dependency on aids can hinder a child's growth. David nodded slowly, as if trying to understand her perspective. But Mia wouldn't hear any of it. No, she interrupted, her voice rising. Ellie needs love and understanding, not forced lessons that hurt her. David's face softened as he finally took in Ellie's expression, her small form leaning against her mother, visibly exhausted and frightened. Mia's right, he said firmly, turning to Edith. This isn't the way we want Ellie cared for. Edith's calm mask slipped ever so slightly, a glimmer of irritation flashing in her eyes. I see, she said, her tone icy. Well, I apologize if my methods don't align with your approach. Mia hugged Ellie close, her decision made. This trial period is over. Edith, you're dismissed. We'll handle things from here. Edith's face twisted into a thin smile, her eyes flashing with a bitterness that sent chills down Mia's spine. Very well, Mrs. Marston, but don't be surprised if Ellie never learns the resilience she needs in this world. With a curt nod, Edith turned and strode toward the house, her footsteps echoing in the stillness of the evening. As Mia held Ellie, a wave of relief washed over her, but beneath it was a lingering fear. She had trusted her instincts tonight, and they had been right, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over.
Quarto. Bạn đã nói. Bằng tiếng Anh viết chương 4 một cách chi tiết. Chat đã nói.
ChatGPT. Chapter 4, Trust and Consequence. The house was quiet the morning after Edith's abrupt dismissal. Mia awoke early, her mind heavy with the memories of the night before. She had replayed the scene in her head repeatedly. Edith's cold expression and the condescending words she'd left behind echoing in her thoughts. The guilt that she had ever allowed Edith near Ellie gnawed at her. Though David had tried to reassure her late into the night, saying they'd only been giving Ellie a chance at independence. Mia moved quietly through the house, hoping to let Ellie sleep in. She needed rest, and so did Mia, though sleep had been elusive. Her worry about Ellie was compounded by an even deeper sense of unease about Edith herself. Something about her demeanor, the way she'd spoken to Ellie, and her unsettling confidence in her harsh methods. It didn't sit right. Mia made her way downstairs and into the kitchen, where she found Ronald preparing breakfast, his posture as steady and calm as always. He looked up as she entered, a small smile softening his usually stoic expression. "Good morning, Mrs. Marston," he greeted, setting down a teapot. "I trust everything is well this morning?" Mia managed a nod, but Ronald's discerning eyes caught her lingering concern. "You're up early, ma'am," he said gently. "I take it last night's events left you with some things on your mind?" Mia sighed, settling onto a stool by the kitchen island. "Yes, Ronald. I'm so glad you were here last night. I just can't shake the feeling that we were fortunate to realize Edith's true nature when we did." She paused, her expression growing thoughtful. "In fact, I feel that something is deeply wrong. That woman." She looked at Ellie as if she were some problem to be fixed. "And her methods." Ronald nodded sympathetically. "I share your unease, ma'am. I noticed certain things myself. She had a rather uncompromising way of speaking about discipline. It was unsettling." Mia's lips tightened. "Yes, exactly. I don't trust her. In fact, I need to find out more about her." Before she could elaborate further, there was a loud knock at the front door, reverberating through the quiet house. Mia's heart skipped a beat, and she exchanged a wary look with Ronald. The timing of the knock felt oddly ominous, given the conversation they were having. Ronald moved swiftly to answer the door, Mia following closely behind. When he opened it, they found Officer Thomas Keating standing on the doorstep, his posture respectful but with a hint of urgency. The Marstons had known Officer Keating for years. He was a regular presence in their neighborhood, checking in on families and keeping the community secure. His serious expression, however, was unusual. "Good morning, Mrs. Marston," he said, tipping his hat politely. "I apologize for dropping by unannounced, but I was hoping to have a word." "Of course, Officer Keating," Mia replied, surprised but welcoming him inside. "Is everything all right?" The officer glanced around the foyer before leaning in, his voice low. "I understand you had a new nanny here recently, Edith Hayes?" Mia felt a jolt at the mention of Edith's name. "Yes, though she's no longer with us. Let's just say she didn't meet our expectations." Officer Keating's expression grew even graver, his gaze steady as he looked between Mia and Ronald. "I'm afraid I need to give you a warning, Mrs. Marston. Edith Hayes has come to our attention in several neighborhoods over the past few years. I can't go into too many specifics, but I'll tell you this. She has a history of behavior that's left many families unsettled." Mia's pulse quickened, a chill running through her. "What kind of behavior, officer?" Keating hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "There have been complaints of psychological manipulation and even some instances of physical harm, though nothing that's resulted in formal charges. She has a pattern of targeting children with special needs and convincing parents that her strict methods are beneficial. By the time families realize the harm she's done, she's usually already gone." Mia felt her hands tremble as she absorbed his words. Her worst fears were being confirmed. She had let a dangerous woman into her home and had allowed her near Ellie. However briefly, she glanced at Ronald, whose usually composed face was taut with concern. "She showed these tendencies here too," Mia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Last night, I caught her forcing Ellie to walk without her safety vest, even though Ellie could barely keep her balance. She seemed to believe that harshness was some form of therapy." Officer Keating's expression darkened. You made the right decision letting her go. Mrs. Marston, given what you've just told me, you've likely saved Ellie from serious harm. Unfortunately, Edith Hayes has a way of slipping through the cracks. Without concrete evidence, it's difficult to prosecute, but we're working on it. I'd advise you to keep a close eye on Ellie for any unusual behavior or signs of distress in the days to come. Mia nodded, feeling the weight of guilt and anger settling over her. Thank you, Officer Keating. I had a feeling something was wrong, but I ignored it, at least at first. I'll be more vigilant. Keating gave her a reassuring nod. I'll be in touch if we learn anything more, and if you notice anything unusual or need assistance, don't hesitate to call. As he left, Mia felt a strange mixture of relief and dread. She had managed to protect Ellie, but only barely, and the knowledge that Edith had harmed other children left her feeling sick. Mia spent the rest of the day in a focused daze, checking on Ellie frequently and watching for any signs of trauma or lingering fear. Fortunately, Ellie seemed to bounce back quickly, her usual cheerful spirit returning by afternoon. She laughed and played with her toys, chatting animatedly with Mia as if nothing had happened. But Mia's mind refused to rest. She had to know more about Edith, to understand how such a person had slipped through the cracks and ended up in their home. That evening, after putting Ellie to bed, Mia sat down with her laptop, determined to find any information she could on Edith Hayes. She started with a simple internet search, typing Edith's name into every search engine she knew. But the results were sparse. There were no social media profiles, no online listings of her work history, nothing to suggest she had ever been a nanny, a caregiver, or even held a formal job. It was as though Edith barely existed. Growing frustrated, Mia tried different combinations, looking for any potential news reports, reviews, or even complaints. But every search led her to the same empty results, as if Edith had carefully erased any trace of her past. She was about to give up when she stumbled upon an obscure online forum for families of children with special needs. The page was filled with advice, resources, and shared stories from parents across the country. Curious, she searched for Edith Hayes within the forum, her heart pounding as she scrolled through the posts. There, buried within a thread from nearly a year ago, was a single comment mentioning an Edith H. and a nightmare nanny experience in another state. Mia clicked on the comment, holding her breath as she read the account of a mother whose child had been subjected to what she described as cruel psychological treatment disguised as discipline. The mother detailed how Edith's firm hand had left her child anxious and withdrawn, behaviors that had persisted long after Edith left. Mia's hands shook as she read, the mother's words reflecting her own experience almost verbatim. She posted a brief response, hoping the mother might still be active on the forum. She also bookmarked the page, vowing to reach out to more families if she could find them. By the time she closed her laptop, a dark realization had settled over her. Edith Hayes wasn't just misguided, she was dangerous, a predator who thrived on the vulnerability of the families she targeted. Mia knew she had a responsibility to speak out, to warn other parents before they made the same mistake. The next morning, Mia called Officer Keating and shared what she had found, hoping it might help them build a stronger case against Edith. He thanked her, his voice grave, and assured her that her information would be added to their investigation. As Mia hung up the phone, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had nearly trusted the wrong person, had come close to letting harm come to her daughter. But she wouldn't make the same mistake again. Edith might have left, but Mia was prepared to do whatever it took to protect Ellie and any other child from her reach. And as she watched Ellie play, blissfully unaware of the danger that had lurked so close, Mia silently vowed that Edith Hayes would never harm another child, no matter what it took. Days passed, but Mia's determination to protect her family and ensure Edith Hayes was held accountable only grew stronger. The eerie silence Edith had left behind felt like a dark shadow lingering over the Marston home. Mia's days were consumed by a new sense of vigilance. Each moment spent watching over Ellie and uncovering more about Edith's past. One morning, Mia sat in the living room with a stack of documents from her recent findings on Edith Hayes. She had managed to connect with several families from the online forum, all of whom shared similar horror stories. Each story held a disturbing consistency. Edith would appear as a composed, professional nanny with seemingly impeccable credentials. She would gain families' trust only to enforce harsh, psychologically damaging methods disguised as discipline. By the time these families realized the harm Edith was causing, she had often vanished, leaving behind only traumatized children and broken households. Mia's hands clenched as she read the accounts. Each page, each story, felt like a warning she wished she'd received earlier. These parents, all vulnerable and trusting, had welcomed Edith into their homes, never imagining she could be a threat. Mia felt a kinship with them, a shared pain that connected her to families she had never met. She knew what had to be done. She couldn't allow Edith to escape justice again. That afternoon, Mia called Officer Keating, who had become an ally over the past week. He had kept her updated on their investigation and listened carefully to every piece of information she gathered. Officer Keating, I've spoken with multiple families now. Each story is disturbingly similar, and none of these parents felt able to pursue legal action due to lack of hard evidence. But they're willing to testify if it would help build a case. Keating's voice was firm, but Mia could detect a hint of relief. Thank you, Mrs. Marston. This information is exactly what we need. I've passed along what you've shared to our district attorney, and with these additional testimonies, we might have grounds for a more substantial case. Mia nodded, though her relief was tempered by a lingering anxiety. Is there any way she could be arrested immediately? I don't want her to have any chance to harm another family while we gather evidence. Keating paused. We're trying, but Edith Hayes is careful. She knows how to keep just enough distance from any actionable offenses. I'll be honest with you. She's been slipping through the cracks for years. The thought chilled Mia, but it only strengthened her resolve. Whatever you need from me, officer, I'll be here. As they ended the call, Mia felt a newfound sense of determination. She knew Edith had to be stopped, not just for her own family's safety but for the sake of every family she could potentially harm. And while Keating and his team worked on gathering legal grounds, Mia decided she would do her own digging. That evening, as David read Ellie her bedtime story, Mia returned to her online research. She typed Edith Hayes again into search engines, exploring every possible angle. She tried searching nearby towns, obscure nanny agency websites, and childcare directories, hoping to uncover anything she might have missed. As she combed through dozens of sites, she finally stumbled upon a small link buried in the archives of an old nanny referral agency, where a vague mention of E. Hayes appeared under the list of past employees. Mia clicked on the link, her heart pounding. It led to a brief mention in a newspaper clipping from a neighboring town. The article detailed a family who had hired E. Hayes as a live-in nanny only to dismiss her after 2 weeks due to inappropriate disciplinary tactics that left their son distressed and fearful. The article didn't go into detail, but Mia felt her heart sink. Yet another family had been impacted by Edith's actions, and another case where she had seemingly slipped away without consequences. Mia jotted down the details and contacted the news outlet, hoping to connect with the journalist who had written the piece. To her relief, she received a response the next day from the journalist, a woman named Sarah Miles. Sarah was eager to speak, admitting that the article had been overlooked for years but hinting that she had more information than she could legally publish at the time. The following morning, Mia met with Sarah in a quiet coffee shop across town. The journalist, a woman with sharp eyes and a professional demeanor. Didn't waste any time getting to the point. Edith Hayes is a master of manipulation, Sarah began, leaning forward as she spoke. Families trust her because she comes across as the perfect nanny, experienced, polite, competent. She knows exactly how to present herself. But once she's in the home, she starts changing things, little by little. By the time parents realize what's happening, it's already too late. Mia felt a chill settle over her. I've heard similar stories from other parents. They felt too intimidated or uncertain to pursue legal action. Sarah nodded solemnly. That's exactly her strategy. Edith targets families with vulnerable children and convinces them that her methods are beneficial. By the time parents begin to suspect something is wrong, she's already planted seeds of doubt in their minds, making them question their own judgment. Mia felt a wave of anger rise within her, her voice tightening. She manipulated us the same way. She made me feel like I was being overprotective, that I was somehow hindering Ellie by not pushing her harder. Sarah's expression softened with understanding. You're not the first parent she's done this to, and unfortunately, you're probably not the last unless we can expose her. I tried bringing attention to this years ago, but without solid evidence. It's difficult. She's evasive, knows the loopholes, and always seems to disappear before anyone can hold her accountable. Mia clenched her hands, determination blazing in her eyes. I'm not letting her get away this time. Officer Keating is already building a case. But we need more testimonies, more evidence. Sarah nodded, her expression resolute. I can help with that. I still have contact information for some families who were impacted by her. They might be willing to come forward if they see others doing the same. Over the next few hours, Mia and Sarah worked together, reaching out to parents across the region who had crossed paths with Edith. Each phone call, each conversation, revealed another story of trauma and distrust that Edith had left in her wake. Parents spoke of children who had once been lively but became fearful, withdrawn, and anxious in ways that seemed to linger even after Edith was gone. One mother shared how Edith had subtly isolated her son, convincing him that he couldn't trust his own parents, and enforcing harsh rules that left him emotionally scarred. Another father described how Edith had tried to enforce therapeutic exercises that left his daughter physically bruised and terrified. Every story added a layer to Mia's understanding of Edith, a woman whose facade of professionalism masked a deeply damaging agenda. As each family agreed to share their testimonies with Officer Keating, Mia felt a glimmer of hope that justice might finally be within reach. Days later, Mia received a call from Officer Keating, his tone more optimistic than it had been since the investigation began. Mrs. Marston, I wanted to let you know that the district attorney is moving forward. Thanks to your efforts, we have enough corroborative evidence to issue a warrant for Edith Hayes. Mia's heart leaped with relief, but she remained cautious. So, she'll be arrested soon, he confirmed. We're coordinating with authorities across several towns to locate her current whereabouts. She's been evading us for a long time, but with your help, we're closing in. Mia's eyes filled with tears of relief as she thanked Keating. The knowledge that Edith would soon face the consequences of her actions was a weight lifting off her shoulders. That night, she and David sat down with Ellie to tell her that Edith would not be coming back, that she was safe and loved. Ellie listened quietly, nodding solemnly as she clutched her favorite teddy bear. Her mother's gentle reassurances seemed to soothe her, and Mia hugged her daughter close, vowing silently that she would always protect her. As Mia tucked Ellie into bed, she felt a profound sense of peace. She had trusted her instincts, gathered a community of support, and done everything in her power to shield her daughter from a dangerous influence. The battle wasn't over. There would likely be court proceedings, testimonies, and challenges ahead, but she felt ready to face them. In the darkness of Ellie's room, Mia whispered to her daughter, No one will ever hurt you again. My love, I'll make sure of it. With that promise lingering in her heart, Mia closed the door softly behind her, knowing that she would continue fighting for Ellie and for every child who deserved a life free from fear. The Marston household hummed with a quiet tension in the days that followed. Mia's initial relief upon hearing that Edith was now a fugitive wanted by authorities had been replaced by an anxious restlessness. Each day, she wondered if Edith had somehow managed to evade capture yet again. The district attorney's office was working to locate her, but with each passing day, Mia feared Edith would simply vanish once more, leaving her trail of damage in the shadows. Then, on a chilly Wednesday morning, Mia received a call that made her heart skip. It was Officer Keating. "Mrs. Marston," he began, his voice steady. "I wanted you to know that Edith Hayes was located and taken into custody last night." Mia exhaled, a rush of relief flooding her. "Thank you, Officer Keating," she said, her voice catching with emotion. "I can't tell you how much this means. There's something else, though," he continued, his tone shifting. "We're moving forward with charges based on the accounts we gathered. However, Edith is refusing to cooperate and claims that she's innocent. She insists her methods were misunderstood and that every family she's worked with misinterpreted her tough love approach." Mia's relief turned to anger. Edith's words echoed in her mind. The bitter, condescending statements she'd made about Ellie needing discipline and independence. It disgusted her that Edith could still believe her methods were justified. "Is there any risk she'll get out on bail?" Mia asked, her voice tense. "We're requesting that she be held without bail due to the number of complaints and her history of eluding accountability," Keating assured her. "In the meantime, the district attorney would like to move quickly. They're asking if you would testify. Mrs. Marston, we believe your account, along with those of the other parents, could be pivotal in ensuring Edith faces justice." Mia didn't hesitate. "Of course, I'll do whatever it takes to make sure she doesn't harm anyone else." After she hung up, Mia stood in the foyer for a long moment, absorbing the gravity of what lay ahead. A trial meant reliving every disturbing encounter, facing Edith in a courtroom, and sharing Ellie's experiences with strangers. But it also meant a chance to put an end to Edith's manipulation once and for all. Understood. 2 weeks later, Mia and David entered the courthouse, joining a room filled with parents who had come forward with their stories. The district attorney, a woman named Lisa Tran, was a determined, sharp-minded professional who had spoken with Mia numerous times, assuring her that they would do everything possible to ensure Edith was held accountable. Mia took her place near the front, David at her side, his hand gripping hers reassuringly. The doors opened, and Edith Hayes entered the courtroom, her expression as composed as ever, her eyes scanning the room with a look of practiced indifference. Mia's stomach twisted at the sight of her, and she felt an instinctive urge to shield herself, as if Edith's presence alone carried some dark, oppressive energy. Edith's attorney was a stern-looking man who rose to address the court. "My client, Edith Hayes, is a respected professional in childcare. Her methods may be misunderstood by some, but she has dedicated her life to helping children. There is no substantial evidence that she acted with harmful intent." Mia's fists clenched as she listened to the attorney's words. She glanced around at the other parents, seeing the same frustration mirrored in their expressions. This woman had hurt so many families, yet here she was, shielded by the guise of misunderstood intentions. When it was her turn, Mia approached the stand, her heart pounding. She took a deep breath, glanced briefly at David, who gave her an encouraging nod, and then turned to face the jury. She recounted, as calmly and clearly as she could, the moments that had led her to dismiss Edith, the bruises on Ellie's legs, the harsh, belittling words Edith had used, and the cold way she'd tried to make Ellie walk without any support. leaving her vulnerable and afraid. As she described that scene in the backyard, her voice trembled with the memory of Ellie's fearful eyes, the look of helplessness on her daughter's face. Ellie has cerebral palsy, Mia continued, her voice growing stronger. She struggles with balance, with muscle control, and she needs her safety gear to prevent falls. Edith knew all of this and ignored it. She claimed it was for Ellie's own good. But I know my daughter. I saw the fear in her eyes, the confusion. This wasn't care. This was cruelty. Mia's gaze shifted to Edith, who sat impassively, her face as blank as stone. The sight of Edith's unfeeling expression only fueled Mia's determination. And the worst part, she continued, is that Edith convinced us we were the ones at fault, that we were overprotective. Even coddling our daughter, she made me doubt my instincts, made me feel that I was somehow failing my own child by not agreeing with her methods. As Mia finished her testimony, she felt a wave of relief. She had spoken her truth, and the weight of her fear and guilt seemed to lighten. She stepped down from the stand and returned to her seat, feeling David's hand slip into hers, grounding her. Over the next few days, other families shared their own experiences. Each testimony added a layer to the picture of who Edith truly was, a woman who had systematically preyed on vulnerable families, convincing them that her methods were necessary, no matter the harm they caused. Some parents broke down as they spoke, their voices trembling with the pain of memories they had tried to bury. One mother recounted how her son had developed a stutter and severe anxiety after Edith left, his confidence shattered. Another father described how his daughter had withdrawn from him entirely, no longer trusting him after Edith's relentless insistence that her parents were weakening her. Each story hit Mia with a fresh wave of sorrow and anger, knowing that she, too, had almost been another chapter in Edith's long, painful history, but it also gave her hope that their voices, together, would finally be loud enough to end Edith's reign of harm. Finally, it was Edith's turn to take the stand. Her demeanor was calm, almost rehearsed. She denied any wrongdoing, framing herself as a professional who simply expected excellence. She claimed that the children she worked with had all lacked proper boundaries, and that her job was to prepare them for a harsh world. Her words were chilling, laced with a tone of superiority that seemed almost pathological. When the prosecution pressed her about the bruises on Ellie's legs, Edith brushed it off. Some minor bruising is to be expected when children are pushed to their limits. It's part of the learning process. I only wanted to teach Ellie that she could do more than she thought. Mia felt her blood boil as she listened to Edith's twisted justification. It was as if Edith saw herself as some martyr for her harsh methods, oblivious to the damage she had caused. But the faces of the jury members grew grim, their expressions hardening with each dismissive answer Edith gave. The trial stretched into the next week, and by the final day, Mia's nerves were frayed. She had given everything she could to ensure Edith's conviction, and now all she could do was wait. She sat beside David, her hands clasped tightly, as the jury returned to deliver the verdict. As the foreperson stood and read the words aloud, "Guilty on all charges," a wave of relief washed over Mia. She barely registered the rest of the court proceedings, only hearing snippets, sentencing recommendations, Edith's emotionless expression as she was led out of the courtroom. She felt as though the entire ordeal had been a dark storm finally lifting, allowing her to breathe freely once more. Outside the courthouse, Mia was met by some of the other parents who had testified. There were tears, hugs, and words of gratitude exchanged, a shared understanding that they had finally found justice not only for themselves but for every child Edith had harmed. One mother, her voice thick with emotion, took Mia's hands and whispered, "Thank you for leading us here. None of us could have done this alone." Mia smiled, though her eyes glistened with tears. "We did this together, all of us, and now our children can finally feel safe." As Mia and David walked back to their car, she felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. The road to healing for Ellie and for their family would still be long, but they could face it without fear. Edith Hayes would no longer be lurking in the shadows, free to harm another family. They had fought, and they had won. That night, as Mia tucked Ellie into bed, she held her daughter close, whispering words of love and comfort. The ordeal had strengthened her resolve, taught her to trust her instincts, and reminded her of the fierce power of a mother's love. She had faced the predator that threatened her family and emerged stronger, knowing she would always protect Ellie with everything she had. And for the first time in weeks, Mia Marston slept soundly, knowing her family was safe. In the weeks following the trial, a renewed calm filled the Marston household. With Edith Hayes safely behind bars, Mia felt a sense of security return that she hadn't felt since that unsettling day Edith had first stepped into their home. Yet, even as a profound relief settled in, she knew that the scars Edith had left would take time to heal. Ellie had been through an experience she was too young to fully understand, and Mia's primary focus now was to help her daughter regain her confidence and feel safe again. Mia's days were now dedicated to creating a sanctuary for Ellie, a space free from fear and full of warmth. She filled their home with activities Ellie loved, setting up art stations and bringing in sensory play items that could help her reconnect with the joy and creativity she'd always shown. Mia knew that healing wouldn't happen overnight, but she was committed to the journey, every step of the way. One morning, as sunlight poured through the large windows of the living room, Ellie sat at the small table Mia had arranged near the window, carefully painting a picture of her favorite stuffed bear, Teddy. Mia watched from the kitchen, a soft smile on her face as Ellie hummed to herself, seemingly lost in her artwork. "Mommy, look!" Ellie exclaimed, holding up her painting proudly. "I made Teddy's eyes sparkle." Mia walked over, admiring the detail Ellie had put into her work. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," she said, kneeling beside her. "Teddy does look sparkly and happy, just like you." Ellie's face brightened, and she hugged Mia, the warmth of her small arms around her neck reminding Mia of just how resilient her daughter was. Ellie seemed to be bouncing back, each day showing small signs that she was beginning to feel safe again. Mia knew, however, that memories could linger, even when children appeared to have moved on. Later that day, Mia sat with Ellie as they played with building blocks, carefully stacking them into a tower. Ellie's small hands moved with a focus that made Mia smile. But then, unexpectedly, Ellie stopped, her expression growing serious. "Mommy?" Ellie asked, her voice soft and tentative. "Why did Miss Edith make me do things that hurt?" Mia's heart sank as she met Ellie's questioning gaze. She had anticipated this conversation might come, but hearing Ellie's small voice asking that question sent a pang of sadness through her. She took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts, and gently pulled Ellie into her lap. "Sweetheart," Mia began, choosing her words carefully. "Sometimes people don't understand what others need. Miss Edith thought that making you do hard things would make you strong. But she didn't understand that you're already strong just the way you are." Ellie's eyes searched Mia's face, her expression thoughtful. "But why didn't she just let me be? I didn't want to do those things." Mia held Ellie close, stroking her hair. "I don't know why, Ellie. Some people think they know what's best for others, but they don't always understand that being kind is more important than being tough." Ellie nodded, nestling into her mother's arms. "I like being kind," she said simply. "And you and Daddy make me feel strong." Mia's heart swelled with love and pride. "And you are strong, Ellie. You're brave and smart, and you make me so proud every single day." After that conversation, Mia felt a weight lift. She had feared that Ellie might carry feelings of confusion or self-doubt. But Ellie's innocent response reassured her that her daughter's spirit remained as pure and resilient as ever. Still, Mia was determined to stay vigilant, watching closely for any signs of anxiety or fear that might linger. She had decided, too, that if Ellie ever needed more support, she would find the best resources available this time, without any compromises. Meanwhile, Mia's own journey toward healing involved finding a way to turn her experience into something meaningful. She had spoken at length with the other families who had testified in the trial, and they had all expressed a shared desire to do something that would ensure no other parent would have to go through the same ordeal. With David's encouragement, Mia decided to start an organization dedicated to supporting families with children who had special needs. The group, named the Family Guardian Initiative, would focus on providing parents with resources to vet caregivers thoroughly, advocate for safe childcare practices, and connect families with vetted professionals. David was incredibly supportive, assisting her in filing the necessary paperwork, establishing a board, and networking with local agencies that could provide additional expertise. They began hosting small informational meetings in their home, reaching out to other parents, educators, and local authorities who could lend insight and resources. Each meeting bolstered Mia's confidence, as more and more families joined, sharing stories and offering their support. One evening, Mia held the first official meeting for the Family Guardian Initiative at their home. Parents filled their living room, sitting on couches and folding chairs as Mia spoke about the organization's goals and shared her own experience with Edith. She felt nervous standing before the group, her voice faltering at first, but as she looked around the room, she saw faces of understanding and encouragement. "Our mission," Mia said, her voice growing stronger, "is to create a world where every family feels secure when they welcome someone into their home to care for their child. No parent should have to go through what we did, and no child should ever feel unsafe. We're here to build that security for all of us." The applause that filled the room brought a tear to Mia's eye, and as she met the appreciative gazes of other parents, she felt an overwhelming sense of purpose. What had once been a source of pain and fear had transformed into something powerful, a movement that could bring lasting change. She felt proud, knowing that her family's struggle could spark something bigger than themselves, something that might prevent others from enduring the same nightmare. A few weeks later, as the organization grew, Mia found herself reflecting on all that had happened. She thought of the journey she and her family had been on, from the terrifying moment she had realized Edith was a threat, to the trial, and finally, to this moment where she could look back and see how far they had come. One afternoon, David joined her as she sat on the porch, gazing out over their backyard where Ellie was playing. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "You've been incredible through all of this," he said quietly, his voice filled with admiration. "Turning something so painful into something positive. I'm proud of you, Mia." Mia leaned into him, a warm smile on her face. "I couldn't have done it without you. Every time I felt like giving up, you reminded me why we were doing this." David chuckled softly, his gaze resting on Ellie, who was building a small fort out of pillows and blankets. "Ellie's the strongest one of us all, isn't she?" "She really is," Mia agreed, watching their daughter with pride. "She's already moved on in a way that amazes me, and seeing her happy, feeling safe again, that's all I could ever want." As they watched Ellie play, Mia felt a profound sense of peace. She knew that challenges would continue to come, as they always did, but she felt ready. She had learned to trust her instincts, to stand up for what was right, and to draw strength from the love that bonded her family together. The Family Guardian Initiative continued to grow, its influence reaching beyond their community. Families from across the state began to join, each story and voice adding to their mission. Mia's work became a channel through which her pain had transformed into resilience, empowering others and giving her a lasting sense of purpose. And with every step forward, Mia knew that her family had become something greater than they had ever been before, stronger, closer, and united by a journey that had tested them but had ultimately helped them discover the depths of their love and strength. As she held David's hand, feeling the warmth of his love, and watched Ellie's laughter fill the air, Mia knew that they were finally at peace. Months passed, and with each day, the Marston family moved further away from the shadow that Edith Hayes had cast over their lives. The Family Guardian Initiative had become a powerful force, with families across the region coming together to support one another, share resources, and advocate for safer childcare practices. For Mia, the organization was more than just a project. It was a mission to ensure no child would ever have to endure the pain and confusion that Ellie had felt. Mia had thrown herself into her work with the initiative, and each meeting, each story, and each family she helped strengthened her resolve. The initiative had grown rapidly, becoming a central resource in the community, and Mia took pride in knowing that her experience had become a beacon of hope and empowerment for others. One morning, Mia sat in her newly established office, surrounded by papers and files. The initiative had outgrown their home, and with the support of donations and volunteers, they'd managed to secure a small office in the heart of the town. The office was modest, but it was filled with warmth, thanks to the photos of smiling families that Mia had pinned to the walls, a reminder of the lives they were changing. Just as she was reviewing a new application from a family seeking guidance, her phone rang. She picked it up to hear the familiar voice of Officer Keating on the other end. "Mrs. Marston, I thought you'd like to know that Edith Hayes has officially been sentenced," Keating said, his tone calm but with a hint of satisfaction. "She received the maximum sentence allowable for her charges, thanks to the testimonies and the evidence we were able to gather. She won't be able to harm anyone else for a very long time." Mia exhaled, a weight lifting off her shoulders. "Thank you, Officer Keating. This wouldn't have been possible without your support. It's been an honor working with you, Mrs. Marston. You turned a difficult experience into something that's helping so many people. I hope you're proud of what you've done," Keating said. Mia thanked him again, feeling a profound sense of closure. Edith's sentencing marked the end of a painful chapter, and though Mia knew that healing was an ongoing process, she felt a renewed sense of peace. She was free to focus fully on her family and her work, without the lingering fear that had haunted her for so long. That evening, Mia and David celebrated the news with a quiet dinner at home. Ellie sat between them, cheerfully recounting her day at school, where she had recently started a new art project. Her smile was radiant, her laughter infectious, and Mia felt a deep sense of gratitude watching her daughter's joy. "Mama," Ellie said as she nibbled on her dessert, "when can I come to your office and help you with the family guardians?" Mia smiled warmly. "Anytime you want, sweetheart. You can even paint some pictures to put on the walls if you'd like." Ellie's eyes sparkled with excitement. "I'll paint a big picture for you tomorrow, with lots of colors, and maybe I can make one for all the other kids too, so they know they're safe." Mia felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes as she reached across the table to take Ellie's hand. "That sounds perfect, Ellie. You're already helping so many kids just by being you." Later, after tucking Ellie into bed, Mia and David sat in the living room, the quiet hum of the evening filling the space between them. David turned to Mia, his expression soft and contemplative. "You've done something incredible, Mia," he said, reaching for her hand. "I'm so proud of you for everything. You turned what happened into something that's making a difference for so many people." Mia leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. "It hasn't been easy," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "Some days, I still think about all that happened, and I wonder if I could have done something sooner. But I know that we did our best. And now, maybe we can help others avoid what we went through." David wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. "You didn't just do your best. You went above and beyond. You're not only helping other families, But you're also showing Ellie what it means to be brave and compassionate. Mia smiled, her heart full. She had found a way to turn her family's darkest days into a source of light for others, and that had been her strength through it all. Over the next several months, the Family Guardian Initiative continued to grow. Mia began organizing workshops, training sessions, and support groups for parents and caregivers. She partnered with local agencies, mental health professionals, and legal experts to provide comprehensive resources, from understanding caregiver rights to recognizing red flags in childcare situations. Families traveled from nearby towns to attend the events, grateful for the safe, welcoming space the initiative offered. The work became a source of healing for Mia as well. Each parent she met, each story she heard, added to her understanding and deepened her empathy. She was no longer just the mother who had protected her daughter. She had become an advocate, a mentor, and a friend to others facing their own challenges. One sunny afternoon, Mia hosted an open house at the initiative's office, inviting the community to learn about the resources they offered. Parents, caregivers, and local officials filled the space, their voices filling the small office with laughter, conversation, and a sense of community. Toward the end of the event, Mia was approached by a young mother holding a toddler on her hip. Her eyes were filled with gratitude as she looked at Mia. "Mrs. Marston," she began, her voice thick with emotion. "I just wanted to thank you. I was so scared to find a caregiver for my son. But your organization helped me feel confident and safe. You've given us a gift we'll never be able to repay." Mia felt a lump form in her throat as she took the woman's hand. "Thank you. Hearing that means more to me than you know. You're not alone in this, you have a whole community here." The woman smiled, her eyes shining with tears. "Because of you." As the event wound down, Mia looked around the office, taking in the smiles, the laughter, and the connections that had formed. This was exactly what she had hoped for. A place where families could find support, understanding, and strength in one another. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, a feeling that the pain and struggle her family had endured had been transformed into something powerful. That evening, after everyone had left, Mia lingered in the office, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. The memories of Edith Hayes still lingered, but they no longer held the power they once had. Instead, they had become a reminder of resilience, a reminder of the strength that could emerge from even the darkest moments. As she locked the office and stepped outside, the cool evening air filled her lungs, and she felt lighter, more at peace. She had faced a nightmare, stood up for her family, and emerged stronger. Her family was safe, and they were thriving, and she had found a way to help countless others find that same safety and peace. Mia Marston walked home that night with a heart full of gratitude, ready to embrace whatever the future held, knowing that she, David, and Ellie would face it together, united and resilient. The past was behind them, and before them lay a future that was finally, truly, safe and full of hope.